The market is almost closing. The last baskets of vegetables are being packed away. Smoke from a nearby cooking fire hangs low in the evening air. Somewhere, meat is sizzling over charcoal, filling the street with a smell that makes people stop walking. There are thousands of animals on Earth. Some become dinner, others become pets. Some are protected by law, some are hunted, some are worshipped. And then there is the hippopotamus, a massive animal weighing more than a ton, living beside rivers covered in thick muscle and fat, and capable of producing an enormous amount of meat. So what if the problem isn't that hippos are inedible? What if humans simply decided they weren't food? And what if that decision tells us something much stranger about ourselves? Because when you look closely, the question isn't really, why don't we eat hippos? It's this: how does an animal become food in the human mind? Imagine standing beside an African river hundreds of years ago. A hippopotamus rises from the water. Its enormous head breaks the surface. Its nostrils open. Its eyes barely move. Then it opens its mouth. The jaws separate into a terrifying red cavern. To us, it looks almost prehistoric. But to a hungry human, wouldn't that enormous body also look like an enormous amount of food? And historically, people did hunt them. Ancient Egyptians hunted hippopotamuses, sometimes depicting the dangerous animals in paintings and carvings. Hippo remains have also been found at archaeological sites, showing that humans in parts of Africa have consumed them. So the mystery becomes even stranger. If humans can eat hippos, why didn't the animal become a normal part of the global food system? The answer seems obvious at first. They're dangerous. But so are buffalo, so are wild boars, so are crocodiles. Humans have repeatedly looked at dangerous animals and thought, that could be dinner. So danger alone can't explain the hippo. Maybe it's the meat. And this is where things become complicated. Hippo meat has been eaten in different parts of Africa, and descriptions from people who have consumed it often compare it to beef or pork, sometimes describing it as rich or fatty. In other words, there is no biological sign saying, do not eat this animal. There is no invisible boundary around a hippopotamus that makes its flesh fundamentally different from the flesh of a cow. And yet most people watching this video probably have a very different reaction to the two animals. A cow appears on a plate. A hippo appears on a wildlife documentary. Why? Here's where it gets strange. The difference isn't necessarily inside the meat, it may be inside us. Consider the supermarket. Walk through the refrigerated section and you'll see something remarkable. The animal has disappeared. There is no cow looking back at you. There is no chicken. There is no pig. There are packages, steak, chicken breast, sausage. The animal has been transformed into a category. And once something becomes a category, the emotional relationship changes. You don't think about the cow, you think about dinner. But imagine a supermarket selling hippopotamus steaks. Would you reach for one? Or would your mind immediately reconstruct the animal? A huge mouth, tiny eyes, mud-covered skin, a creature capable of charging a boat. Suddenly the meat isn't anonymous anymore. But then another question appears. Why did some animals become anonymous in the first place? This is where history enters the story. Thousands of years ago, humans didn't have supermarkets. They had villages, herds, forests, rivers. And every animal had to be judged individually. Could it be caught? Could it be controlled? Could it reproduce near humans? Could it survive captivity? Could humans move it? Could humans feed it without spending more energy than they received back? These questions quietly shaped civilization, and the hippopotamus performs terribly on almost everyone. A cow can be herded, a hippo cannot. A chicken can live near a house. A hippo requires enormous amounts of vegetation and access to water. A pig can reproduce under human management. A hippopotamus is territorial, powerful, and extremely difficult to control. So perhaps the mystery isn't why humans didn't choose hippos. Perhaps humans never had much reason to choose them. But there is another problem. Even if an animal is difficult to domesticate, humans can still hunt it. And hippos have enormous bodies. One successful hunt could provide a huge amount of meat. So why didn't hunting become widespread? Because now we encounter something almost absurd. The bigger the animal becomes, the more dangerous getting close to it can become. Modern observations of hippos show just how formidable they are. They can move surprisingly quickly on land despite their enormous size, and they are highly territorial around water. A boat drifting too close isn't encountering a harmless giant. It may be entering another animal's territory. And when that animal weighs more than 1,000 kilograms, the consequences of a mistake become very different. One person with a spear facing a massive herbivore sounds almost ridiculous. But for much of human history, this was the reality. The animal doesn't need to defeat you in some epic battle. You only need to make one mistake, and suddenly, dinner isn't worth the risk. Except, humans are famous for taking risks for food, so there must be something else. Look at elephants. Humans have hunted elephants for thousands of years. Their meat has been consumed, and elephants are arguably even more enormous. So why didn't elephants become livestock? Again, the answer seems to involve economics. An elephant is incredibly expensive to feed. It grows slowly compared with smaller domestic animals, and controlling one is difficult. But humans still found ways to use elephants, not primarily as food, as workers, as transport, as symbols of power, as something with value beyond meat. And this may be the hidden key. Animals don't become part of human culture simply because they are edible. They become part of culture because humans find a useful relationship with them. A cow gives milk, it reproduces, it can pull, it can be herded, its meat can be harvested repeatedly across generations. A chicken lays eggs, a sheep produces wool, a goat survives in harsh environments. The hippopotamus? It mostly gives humans one thing, a dangerous opportunity to kill a giant animal. And that may not have been enough, but now something even stranger happens. Because the hippopotamus isn't merely absent from our plates. It's present in our imagination. Think about children's books, cartoons, zoos, wildlife documentaries. The hippopotamus often appears as a strange, almost comical creature. Round body, huge mouth, little ears, a gentle-looking giant. And yet that appearance can be dangerously misleading. Hippos are responsible for numerous human deaths in Africa, particularly when people encounter them near water. The same animal that looks like a cartoon character can become terrifying when its territory is threatened. So perhaps culture has done something fascinating. It has separated the hippo into two different creatures, the animal we see and the animal we eat. But if culture can make a cow feel like food, could culture make a hippo feel like food too? History suggests the answer is yes. During periods of famine, war, or scarcity, humans have repeatedly expanded the boundaries of what counts as edible. When ordinary food disappears, the list gets longer. Wild animals, insects, roots, unfamiliar plants, whatever can provide energy. And that tells us something uncomfortable. Edible isn't always a property of the animal. Sometimes it is a property of the situation. A food that seems disgusting when you're full can become precious when you're starving. A creature that seems sacred to one culture can be ordinary food to another. And an animal that seems completely unacceptable today may have been someone's dinner centuries ago. So perhaps the question, why don't we eat hippos, has been backwards all along. Maybe we should ask, why do we eat the animals we do? Because once you ask that question, the familiar world starts to look strange. Why chicken? Why pork? Why beef? Why these animals? Why not zebra? Why not horse? Why not elephant? Why not hippo? There is no single biological law dividing the planet into food animals and non-food animals. There is a complicated mixture of geography, history, economics, religion, technology, danger, tradition, availability, and emotion. And somewhere inside that mixture is a decision humans make so effortlessly that we rarely notice we're making it. We look at one animal and see dinner. We look at another and see a living being. But here's where everything changes. The hippopotamus forces us to confront the uncomfortable distance between those two thoughts. Because biologically, the boundary isn't as clean as we imagine. A cow has muscles. A hippo has muscles. A chicken has organs. A hippo has organs. Both breathe. Both feel pain. Both struggle to survive. Both are trying, in their own strange way, to remain alive. Yet one can become a sandwich. The other becomes the subject of a wildlife documentary. So where exactly did that boundary come from? Perhaps it came from survival. Perhaps it came from agriculture. Perhaps it came from economics. Perhaps it came from culture, or perhaps it came from something deeper inside the human brain. Our ability to divide the living world into categories that make survival easier. Food, friend, threat, pest, pet, sacred animal, wild animal. And once a category becomes familiar, it can feel like reality itself. But categories are not always nature's categories. They are ours. And that may be why the hippopotamus is so fascinating. Not because its meat is uniquely poisonous, not because humans are incapable of eating it, not because nature declared it off limits, but because this enormous animal sits just outside one of humanity's oldest invisible boundaries, the boundary between something alive and something to eat. And perhaps the strangest part is that we rarely notice the boundary until something crosses it. A cow crossing it is ordinary. A hippo crossing it feels shocking, and that reaction tells us less about the hippo than it does about us. Because somewhere between the ancient hunter beside an African river and the person standing in a modern supermarket, humans learned to turn living animals into categories. Some became livestock, some became wildlife, some became symbols, some became dinner. And the hippopotamus, It remained mostly on the other side of the line. Not because nature necessarily placed it there, but because history did. And perhaps that leaves us with a final question. If our ancestors had domesticated hippos instead of cattle, if children had grown up seeing hippo farms instead of cow farms, if supermarkets had always sold hippo steaks beside chicken and beef, would a hippopotamus feel like food to you today? Or would you still look into those strange little eyes and wonder how we ever learned to eat anything at all?